Power on WJZZ TV, the coolest station in the world, streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. Please like, subscribe, share, and comment.
Hello, everyone. I'm Denise Kiechoff, the host of Speaking Truth to Power, the new progressive voice in the Midwest. This is my co-host, Dr. Nakpangi, and this is Leah Dotson. She is actually our producer. We just wanted to bring her on so people will eventually know who they'll be reaching out to, and they can put a face with the name and the voice that will be calling them and booking our guests. Right now, today, we have Yusuf Rabi. Yusuf Rabi is the floor leader in the Michigan House for the of the Democratic Party. He's now serving his term in the 53rd Senate House District seat, where he has been a constant progressive, where he has passed such legislation as PA 118, which Yusuf will tell us about, which has to do with, and I'm trying to remember, Yusuf, that one was about polluter pay. Am I mistaken?
We can't hear you.
Oh, Yusuf? You know what, Yusuf? I think we're having just a little technical difficulty. While we're straightening that out, let me tell you guys a little bit more about Yusuf. Yusuf has established a strong track record.
He has to turn his audio on.
Yusuf, can you check to make sure that your audio is on? Because on this end, our everything is fine, but we can't hear you. So can you check your audio really quick? You have his number so you can call him. You have his number?
Yeah, Denise.
Just call him.
Okay, go ahead. All right, people, we are really sorry. We are having some technical difficulty right now.
Don't you just love technology and how they have
I
that?
know.
Wait,
And
when it
Yusuf,
works.
Just call
and
him.
Yusuf has told us his audio is on.
Do you mean to FaceTime him?
No.
Just call.
Okay, once again, guys, we do apologize. We are having
Hey,
some.
Yusuf?
Yeah, hey, how's it going?
Hey, we're just gonna do it via phone so that
Okay,
they can
sounds
hear you.
good.
Okay.
Okay, once again, everyone, we have Yusuf Rabi, who actually holds, and I am so sorry, everyone. We're just
Well,
experiencing
he
a
can
little
still do video. We just have the audio this way. So
right, where he is representing the 53rd Senate, the State House District. So, Yusuf, tell us about some new bills you passed. I think I know you probably have a program you want to go to, but I really want to talk about the clean slate, which I know you were really big in helping. And a lot of people right now understand what the clean slate is, but why don't you tell us about it?
Absolutely. So you can hear me okay now, right?
yes, we can hear you.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you so much. Well, thanks for having me on today. As you were saying, Denise, thank you for the introduction. My name is Yusuf Rabi. I serve as the Democratic floor leader in the State House of Representatives. And I represent the 53rd State House District, which is most of the city of Ann Arbor. And so I am proud to be in my third term now serving the 53rd District. So as you said, one of the pieces of legislation that I got signed into law was part of the clean slate package of bills. My bill in particular was around wait periods, because previously, if you had a felony or a misdemeanor charge, you had to wait up to 5 years in order for your record to be eligible for petition expungement. And my bill shortened that wait period 3 years so that more people would become eligible more quickly. And taken as a whole, the package did a variety of things, including making more misdemeanors and more felonies eligible for expungement, and also creating what's known as an automatic expungement process. And that automatic expungement process would make us one of the unique states in the country to actually have that. We actually are going to be one of the first in the country to have this type of expungement. So that's really, really important and transformational, and something that I'm very proud to have been a part of.
Right, because I think what a lot of people don't understand is that when someone's been arrested and they have a record, they have a very hard time getting a job. And sometimes they actually lose their job if they're arrested. And once you lose your job, you tend to lose your housing. And if you have a family, now all of a sudden you don't have a job, you don't have housing, and you're homeless. And sometimes you can go stay with family, but you have to wait for expungement. And waiting 7 years to try to get back to work, 7 years to try to rent or buy a house, because I'm not sure if people are aware of this, but you cannot move into public housing if you have a record. Certain felonies and certain misdemeanors, and sometimes just a record itself will keep you out of public housing. And public housing can be a great start because, along with public housing, some of the programs they have will actually help you save money to eventually buy your own home. So it can help a lot of people out of poverty. But the thing is, the people that they're targeting, if they possess a record and can't have it expunged for 7 years, I mean, that's 7 years you literally have to wait. So, what were some of the reasons behind you guys shortening the time? Because those would be the reasons I wanted I would want the time shortened.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it, but also, I mean, the timeline was pretty arbitrary to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, honestly, we would have, in an ideal world, wanted that time period to be shortened even more, but there was only so much that we were able to negotiate during this process, and that's what we were able to get, was 3 years. But the main part about this, though, again, is in addition to shortening that time period, increasing the number of misdemeanors and felonies is really important too. Now, before you could only have one felony.
Right.
We've increased that to 3 nonviolent felonies, and for misdemeanors, we've increased it substantially. It used to be that you could only have, I believe, 2 misdemeanors, and anything more than that was not expungible. But we've changed that now to make it actually an unlimited number of nonviolent misdemeanors, and so a lot of those changes will make a big impact in people's lives. But one of the key components there too is making certain cannabis-related offenses that are legal now. Under our current laws, making those expungible. That was a really important change as well.
Right.
And Isaac Robinson was actually part of helping to push for that. Now, we were only able to get basically use and possession expungible. We weren't able to get agreement on issues around growing or other types of offenses yet, but we're still working on that, and hopefully at some point soon we will be able to include those in the list of expungible offenses. And we also included, by the way, a number of driving related offenses that basically all driving offenses were not expungible before, and now we've created a list of several that will now be expungible offenses as part of this legislation. And just if I could really quickly, the reason that the automatic expungement piece is so important is because for petition expungement, you really have to have the means and resources to be able to hire an attorney, to go to court, to pay the fees.
Right, exactly.
Not everybody has access to that. And in fact, most people don't. And so before our legislation became law, 90% of the time people didn't get their record expunged, even though they were eligible, because of that onerous and expensive process that they would have to go through. So with automatic expungement, which the automatic component does have a bit of a longer wait time on it. You have to wait 10 years before your record is automatically expunged. Mm-hmm. But even with that, we believe that many people who were not able to access the petition expungement process before will now have expungement for their records. And in fact, there are hundreds of thousands of Michigan residents that overnight became eligible for expungement when these bills became law this month.
Now, I'm curious about something. Who is going to tell people? Because this is what happens. Literally, laws are passed every day in Lansing, and they affect us directly, but we don't know about them. I mean, I know some of, like, the clean slate is really great, because there are times when I've actually had friends who, one of my girlfriends, she forgot to renew her insurance because she had set up an automatic payment, changed her bank account, totally forgot to contact her insurance company and let her insurance company know. So she's driving around, and one day her son's out driving. I think he was like in West Bloomfield or something, and he got pulled over and he got a ticket for not having insurance. And he didn't tell his parents. He just thought, well, you know what, when the new insurance card comes, I'll mail it in or something. And so it just went on, and he never explained it to my girlfriend Kimberly. And so he's out about 6 months later, and his license expired, and he totally forgot he had a birthday. His license expired, so he gets pulled over and he gets arrested. Now, these are people who have always paid their insurance, and all of this goes back to the fact that she, changed her bank account and totally forgot to, contact the insurance company and give them the new account. She actually changed her bank. So her son ends up getting arrested based on the fact that the insurance was why they stopped him, because he was driving the same vehicle and still no insurance. So not only do they arrest him, but they're like, okay, so you're flaunting it because now this is your second time with no insurance. And some people just can't afford insurance because the reality is it is expensive.
Very expensive. Insurance is almost the cost of a house note.
Right.
Especially in the city of Detroit right now.
Right. And other places too, because I have an 18-year-old that's driving, and she's driving a leased vehicle, and that vehicle has to be fully insured, and it's expensive. And so you see a lot of that. And the thing is, her son was arrested, her car was towed. Now he
And
has
impounded, not
and
just towed.
impounded.
So all this money is accumulating.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there was a time when, we see a lot of that in Detroit right now. So how do you see that? How?
Wait, I think you kind of went away with the original question because you.
Well, my question is, okay, how are communities that you are aware of reaching out to people and letting people know what's going on?
Yeah, so there's been, first of all, on the insurance issue, I agree with you 100%. Unfortunately, a lot of the reforms that were passed last term have not helped any of that, which I was not supportive of those reforms because they cut people's care without actually reducing costs. So, but here we are, and obviously there's a lot of work to be done still with all of that. But on the communication aspect, there's a lot of effort from individual members of the legislature that have been going out to actually communicate this to our residents, individually in terms of what the state is doing. Frankly, a lot of the money that we've allocated towards this is going to create the actual computer system that needs to be phased in order to actually do the automatic expungement that we're talking about. But once that automatic expungement kicks in, there's really not, other than basically telling people that their records have been expunged, there's not a whole lot else, I think, that, we need to be, bugging people about, because hopefully once that record is expunged, that person can then, and notifying them of that, then that person can go out and seek, employment or housing or whatever it was that they weren't able to access before.
So, Rep. Robbie, how will the constituents be aware that this is even a process or option that they have? Will legislators put this out in their quarterly newsletter? Will it be something mailed to them? Are you going to do an email blast? Will it be on social media? How will you inform constituents that they now have this right?
Yeah, so it's a little bit of all of that, making sure that we're trying on various fronts to make sure that people understand what their rights are. In terms of what official communications will come from the state, some of that is still TBD, since the phase-in for the computer system is still going to take a little while. But once that happens, we're hoping, and frankly, there's other legislation that may be necessary to force the state to actually communicate in an official manner. But in terms of the legislative communications, yes, that's all been happening already and will continue. I know I was on a program with Robin McCoy here in Washtenaw County, talking through what these new expungement laws mean, who can access them, and so on. So that process will continue. Forums, I hope, will continue, and as well as those official legislative communications as we were talking about.
Okay, thank you for that. Ladies and gentlemen, you are watching Truth to Power on WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the world, streaming live on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and
YouTube.
YouTube. I didn't say YouTube. Please like, share, follow, and subscribe.
Okay. PSA right now, ladies and gentlemen. As we battle the COVID-19 pandemic, it's clear that misinformation can be just as deadly as the awful virus and spread just as quickly. Myths are spreading on the internet and social media, so it's important to know the facts to keep our community healthy. The vaccinations offered through Wayne County Public Health are scientifically proven to be safe. It's important that each of us get vaccinated. Vaccine schedules as soon as possible. Visit waynecounty.com/COVID-19 to get the latest information.
And I see that Julie Dye says that that's right, like the voter suppression laws. So we have our audience that are agreeing that we need to inform the public when things change.
Yeah, I mean, Yusuf, I think you would probably have a lot of statewide support if you were to just reach out and say, you know what, I think the state is responsible for actually contacting us, maybe in a PSA. I mean, we get PSAs from the governor, from the attorney general, from the secretary of state all the time. So I think there should actually be funding available to make a PSA. So, on TV, on Facebook, on YouTube, on Apple
Billboard or
TV, and
something.
even exactly, even if we were to do a couple of billboards and for people to see, because I know, like in Washington County, I know like our prosecutor actually moved a expungement attorney in literally weeks before this happened, and started putting it out there, and people started coming to him. Now I'm sort of curious, what about the cost? Because sometimes there is going to be a cost. Is the state looking at ways to sort of help people? Are you looking at some of maybe the universities coming in and helping people fill out the paperwork? Because one of the problems is there is paperwork to be filled out. You don't just walk in and say, hey, here's my record, expunge me. There is a process to go through. Is the state going to be responsible for helping with that process, or what does that process look like? Or will counties be responsible for that, or cities or townships?
Well, that's sort of the beauty of the automatic expungement process for those that are eligible, is that there isn't any paperwork that they have to fill out. It will be automatically done for them in the computer system. And frankly, that's the main, like I said, that's the main cost that the state is incurring, is actually creating the computer system that will actually be able to go through and automatically change those records. For those that are not eligible for automatic expungement, unfortunately, we will still have the same system that we did before, but more people will be eligible more quickly after their convictions and their sentences or so on are done. And so, but unfortunately, we still need support from local prosecutors like Prosecutor Sabat and others who are helping out on the ground to help people that are doing the petition expungement process still. We will need help and support from them to help folks to actually be able to access those petition expungements. But like I said, hopefully less people will be needing to access those, because a lot of records will be automatically expunged once that system kicks in.
Right. So like it is now, people who need their records expunged don't have to wait for the computer system, right? Can they go to their local prosecutor's office? What sort of does that look like for those, for those who are watching us right now or listening to us that don't know? What does that look like? Because someone right now could be like, you know what? I'm that 5 years out. I've only got that one felony. I don't have any misdemeanors, and it was just an insurance thing with my car. What can those people do now?
Well, actually, explain to us the expungement process, the length that someone has before they can have it expunged, and then the process for the actual expungement.
So if you have under the new law, as of mid-April, the laws that changed, if you can have basically an unlimited number of nonviolent misdemeanors and still be able to petition to get your record expunged. The way that the petition process works is you usually have to hire an attorney or somebody who knows how to navigate the courts, but technically I think you can do it yourself. But you basically have to go to the court, you have to go before a judge and ask for your record to be expunged. And most cases, your record will be expunged. And
Okay.
now this, again, allows you to be eligible even if you have more misdemeanors and more felonies than you used to be able to have. But the key part of this process, like I said, is the automatic piece, which makes it accessible to more people because they won't have to go through that more onerous and expensive process.
And is there a wait time before somebody can actually apply for expungement?
Yes, so there are wait
5
times.
years?
As I was saying earlier, those wait times are reduced now. They used to be 5-year wait periods, and now they're down to 3 for misdemeanors. I believe it's still 5 for some felonies, and it's, I think, 7 years if you have multiple felonies, and then it's 10 years for automatic expungement.
Okay.
But it's retroactive too. So folks that have, for example, if you committed let's say you committed a felony in 2005, and have the sentence, you've gone through that, you've ended your probation and all that, and it's been 10 years since all of that ended. Once this computer system goes into effect, your felony will be automatically expunged.
Okay,
So
great.
there are, like I said, hundreds of thousands of Michigan residents today that would be eligible for automatic expungement, even with the 10-year wait period, because they've already waited the 10 years.
Okay, and we have a caller in the line. Caller, can you state your name and where you're calling from?
Hi, this is Najanava Harvey Quinn. I'm calling from Detroit. How is everyone this morning or afternoon? Sorry.
We're great. Thank you. How are you? And you're on with
I am.
Speaking Truth to Power with Nakpangi and Denise and Leah and Rep. Robbie. Do you have any questions for Rep. Robbie?
I do. I have some questions about the caregiver regulations. So I work with people who were trying to give pathways to legal, like who may have had convictions before when it came to cannabis-related offenses. So we are definitely looking at this expungement program. But their concern was that they're being excluded from the caregivers licensing right now. With these expungements,
Right.
is it possible that they are then going to be able to be qualified for caregivers?
Well, Rep. Robbie, can you tell us about that?
I had a little bit of trouble hearing the question. Something about caregivers. Do you mind repeating it?
Yes, so she was.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay, what she was saying is that she has some concerns about the caregivers. Some of the caregivers, who've actually had charges and things are looking for expungement. And she was wondering, after this, will they be able to obtain a license when they're done?
I believe so, yes. I believe that will open the door for more people to become caregivers, yes. So, but it depends again on which felonies and which misdemeanors they have and which ones that they do have are expungible. Because again, we were able to get some cannabis felonies that became expungible and some that we were not able to get expungible, and same with driving offenses and so on. So not everything is expungible. Violent felonies are not expungible, and so on. So there are some nuances to all of this, but generally speaking, if you fit within the categories of what is expungible in terms of misdemeanors and felonies, I do believe that opens the door up for caregivers.
Okay. Thank you, caller, for your call and your question.
And I think the reason this question was posed to Rep. Robbie is because I'm not sure that people are aware of this, but Rep. Robbie is one of the few people in Lansing. Well, I shouldn't say few. He's one of the more progressive people in Lansing who's actually doing new laws around cannabis. Rep. Robbie, do you want to tell us about that?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for asking. And this is that's a great. The caller's question is actually a really good segue. Because,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Right.
Very good segue.
Because frankly, one of the things that I've been working on. So two quick things. The first is, of course, all these expungement things deal with people that are done with their time, serving in jail or probation and so on. And making sure that they have clean records. But it doesn't really address the fact that there are many people who are still incarcerated for things that are now legal under our current cannabis laws.
Exactly.
What's that?
You have the whole room saying exactly.
Yeah. So we gotta. I heard it best from my good friend and former colleague Sheldon Neely, who is now the mayor of Flint. But when he was a state representative, he came to hash bash in Ann Arbor, and he said, after proposal 1 passed, he said, "We freed the weed, now we've got to free the people."
Absolutely.
That sounds like Mayor Neely.
That is spot on, and that's what I've been working on. So there's a lot of people that are working on the clemency aspect of things. We need to encourage our governor to actually make sure that we're granting clemency to those who are in our jail system, our prison system, that, again, have committed offenses that are no longer illegal. It's unacceptable that they're still incarcerated. They are, frankly, they're costing the taxpayers money every day that they're in jail. And
Right.
they shouldn't be in jail. They should be out in the communities and able to get their feet back under them and be with their families and so on. So
You're
definitely an area that I've been doing a lot of work on. And if I could, just one more piece of that.
go ahead.
As we speak about the cannabis space, and hopefully we can move into that conversation a little bit too, because, as we see the cannabis economy growing in our state, we are seeing essentially, that economy is becoming dominated by white individuals and predominantly male individuals.
Exactly.
And that is a demographic shift from who used to be, in the cannabis space. And that is, frankly, detrimental, I think, to the long-term viability of our cannabis industry. And so we have a system where the day after we, quote unquote, legalized cannabis, we created a shift in the economic opportunities and the economic ownership of the cannabis market, and basically, stole business, frankly, from people that had been operating in this space, doing what is now legal, and shifted it to a white male dominated market. And so one of the things that I've been doing a lot of work on is, how do we create not just economic opportunities in the form of jobs, but economic opportunities in the form of ownership, because ownership, Black ownership, Latino ownership in the cannabis space is a must. And ownership is different from working as a laborer or as a participant via a job. Ownership opens up other types of opportunities, investment, and so on. And that is really what we should be looking at and focusing on. I'm not as interested in sort of, we'll find jobs for ex-felons in the cannabis community. No, we want ownership.
Right. I agree with you on
that I've been trying to figure out how we can essentially go to the people who were formerly incarcerated, felons, or people who have misdemeanor cannabis records, and finding opportunities for them to actually own, and reducing barriers when it comes to state licensing, the fees that they have to pay to make sure that they can open their own dispensaries and other types of businesses in the cannabis space, actually be owners, business entrepreneurs, and actually build their own networks and investment opportunities there. So that's really what I've been focusing on in the cannabis space, and I'm glad that the caller asked her question, because that hits right on a lot of the stuff.
You're actually right, because
that actually leads right into my next question.
Okay, go
if
ahead.
I have the time, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. What's your next question?
So my next question was literally about that, because we're developing it's called the Clean Smoke Community Investment Project. And we are working with communities, with minority communities, divested communities, to make sure that they have a stake of ownership in this emerging cannabis market. And I was going to ask if you would align with us, and maybe we can go over the program with you and perhaps align together on it.
So did you hear that, Rep. Robbie?
I did not, no.
Okay, our caller is part of what is called a Clean Smoke Investment Project, where what they would be doing is actually working with people of color and having them helping them to open businesses. So she's wondering if that's something you would be willing to work with her on, because, with all transparency, I actually serve on the Cannabis Caucus. I serve in the Cannabis Caucus in the state of Michigan.
I think all
And
of us are part of the
I think we're all part of that.
Cannabis
And what I've been fighting for, and what I've been trying to get out there is, I hear some of the white men that come on to us, and I've seen them on their talk shows, their YouTubes, and the first thing they say is, "Oh yeah, I will so hire the Black people that have had, that have been locked up. I will so give them a job." Here's the reality: we don't want you to give us a job. We want to own things.
Absolutely.
And that seems to be
Right on.
extremely right. That seems to be extremely pervasive. I also belong to a group online where I hear a lot of people complaining, people of color saying, oh yeah, this person wants me to apply for a license. The license will be in my name, but they will literally be running everything. So once again, you have this go around where, the white male is trying to step in and take over. And we've also had some people talking about companies in Detroit that have opened up and they've pushed out smaller places that were people of color to begin with, and they've been there forever. And that's something that's sort of pervasive because you can only have certain cannabis related businesses within a certain amount of area of each other. And I truly do understand why the city did this. The city did this because the larger business is going to pay more taxes. They're going to invest more in a building. However, the population that the city has said that it's going to help, which is people of color, you're sort of pushing them aside.
It's
So
not sort of. They are
No, yeah, they
pushing
are.
people of
right.
color
So
aside.
they are pushing people of color aside to bring in the larger revenue, because normally what happens is like you will get 3 or 4 white males and they will go into business together, but they won't bring a person of color in. But they'll be more than willing to stand in a camera shot with that person of color going, look at who we're helping and look at who we're going to employ. And what I've heard from the community, which I'm also a part of because I'm a woman of color, is we do not want to work for you. We want to work for ourselves. If I want to open a business, I don't need to get a license in your name and you just go pay me so much and you're running everything. So what is sort of your response to that? Because that's becoming pretty pervasive in the cannabis world in Michigan.
And before you respond, you
Yeah.
are watching Speaking Truth to Power on WJZZ TV, the coolest station in the world, streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter. Please like, share, subscribe, and follow.
Oh, and a PSA, as we battle COVID-19 pandemic, it's clear that misinformation can be just as deadly as this awful virus and spread just as quickly. Myths are spreading on the internet and social media. It's so important to know the facts and keep our community healthy. The vaccines offered through Wayne County Public Health are scientifically proven to be safe. It's important that each of us gets vaccination scheduled as soon as possible. Visit waynecounty.com/COVID-19 to get the latest information and schedule appointments.
And you can join this conversation by calling 313-355-6018. Again, that number is 313-355-6018.
And we're right now presently talking to Rep. Robbie, who sits in the Michigan House and is one of the most progressive in the Michigan, in basically in Lansing, and has no problem reaching across the aisle to the Republicans to going, hey, look, this is just as good for your community as it is for ours. Now,
And that's what I love about Rep. Robbie. You actually do reach out across the aisle to get legislation passed. You're not one of the Democrats who just stick to their party. You build those relationships with Republican members, and I really appreciate that about you.
so where do
Thank
you,
you.
so
You're saying that actually the expungement bill package that we were talking about earlier was bipartisan as well. That was something we worked with both sides of the aisle on, and frankly, some issues, we can cross the aisle, we can work together, not compromise our core values, but still get something good done for the state. And that's where I love the work that I do in Lansing, and thank you for mentioning that.
Oh, no, thank you for actually doing the work. But do you see any sort of new legislation? Because I know in the package of bills that were passed about cannabis and cannabis businesses that there is room for people of color, and sometimes the licensing fee is reduced through helps of other organizations, because it's really hard to start a business when you're starting from behind the 8 ball to begin with. So where do you see that going?
Well, so getting back to your question earlier and to the caller's question, I would love to learn more about the program that she referenced, because a lot of that is stuff that I'd be very interested in helping with.
Okay.
In terms of helping, to grow Black and Latina ownership
And Native American.
Those are very important things to do. So I would be happy to connect and help and understand more about that organization. But to your point earlier too, and what you were talking about in terms of what we often see with white business owners that maybe bring on, one person of color to kind of sign the paperwork and help them with that is pervasive, and that is something that is unfortunate. But it ties into, kind of your second question here about because frankly, I think what you're referencing is the social equity program at the state.
Exactly.
Which
Yes.
was part of Proposal 1. It was a requirement that the state put together a social equity program, but unfortunately, the way that it's really unfolded is really not creating the kind of social equity that was hoped for, I think. And I think a big part of that is because you have essentially, the way that the state has set it up. You have majority black communities where white owners are essentially coming in using a black community member potentially to set up the business, even though those white owners are still going to be the ones mainly profiting from it.
Right. So I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And they're the ones really taking advantage of that, and it's not creating the kind of social equity and the kind of business ownership that we need and deserve in the state of Michigan for Black and Latina business owners.
Right. So basically, you're saying that they're using the Black community as a mascot.
Right, and they're using it to access, the reduced fees and licensing.
Exactly.
That they would get, and they're moving to places like Detroit and Ypsilanti and Pontiac. Yeah. To essentially take advantage of those opportunities, which are meant for the intention of the social equity program was essentially to get more people of color into the cannabis ownership space. What it's being taken advantage of by white business owners who are essentially moving in, using those same advantages, and essentially gentrifying the business space around in these communities of color, and that's really. So it's really in some ways become counterproductive, and that's what we need to be looking at fixing, and finding real solutions and real opportunities that change the conversation and the dynamic that's been emerging.
Well, Rep. Robbie, you know what? When you start finding those solutions, contact us, because we will be the first one to have you on to actually put that out there. And we would like to thank you so much. You actually sort of segue into what we're doing next. We appreciate you coming on so much, Rep. Robbie. And if you don't mind, we'd actually like the right to call you back.
And actually, if you want to stay on the line, we have Prosecutor Eli Savitt that has joined the conversation. We're going to be moving gears a little bit, talking about the George Floyd situation and the verdict that has come down. So if you would like to stay on and be part of that conversation, you're more than welcome to.
Right, because we're just looking at the effect it has on all communities, and I want to reference this, and I'm pretty sure Prosecutor Savitt knows about this. I actually talked to Rep. Robbie on Friday. I was trying to reach him, and what happened in Ann Arbor was there was an Asian American business whose doors were kicked in. I'm not mistaken, were they robbed, Rep. Robbie?
Yeah.
Right. And it was very unusual because something like that had never happened. So, and it was right after the verdict, and we all know what's been going on with Asian Americans in the United States. For some reason, people have just decided they have the right to beat them.
They lost their minds. That's what's going on.
Right.
This is coming from a mental health clinician. People have lost their minds.
Right. I truly don't understand. And that's just so shocking. And so I think with that and with the verdict, because Rep. Robbie, just like Prosecutor Savitt, we all live in this community, and this is something that we don't normally see. And I'm just wondering, how do you think, Prosecutor Savitt, how do you think our communities reacted to the George Floyd, to what's been going on, to finally a trial where a white man has killed a black man, uniform or not? Finally, a trial and a guilty conviction.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that in terms of how our communities responded, it's been with a sense of relief, but with a sense of understanding that one guilty verdict is not justice. I think it's important to emphasize, and I've been asked this several times over the last week. And do you think this is a turning point? We finally saw an officer who was convicted of murder, for what that officer did while in uniform. And look, I certainly hope so, but I think we need to be realistic about this. The George Floyd murder was, caught on tape. It was unimpeachable that, it was just a craven act. You had a man lying on the ground for 9 minutes and 29 seconds, saying, "I can't breathe." And Derek Chauvin killed him, and that was all on camera. Does it, portend something for the future? Are we going to see more convictions when officers kill people, murder people on the job? Certainly, I would hope that we would see more accountability, but I think it's important to remain cautious, and then also to really keep working towards what real justice would be. Because what happened in the George Floyd murder trial was not justice. Justice would mean that George Floyd was with us today. Justice would mean that George Floyd was with his daughter today. What happened was accountability, and a welcome measure of accountability. But George Floyd didn't want a murder conviction. George Floyd wanted to breathe.
Right.
And real justice, and I think that our community has been pushing towards this. Real justice means that these types of tragedies don't happen in the first place. And that's what we all need to keep fighting for, not just breathe a sigh of release and pretend like one conviction has moved us beyond the problem that we see repeatedly with policing of communities of color in America.
Right. And I have to say this, I hear all the time people saying, well, we need to defund the police. We need to reform the police, and Rashida Tlaib just recently.
As well as Mary, the other congresswoman.
Oh, well, I was just going to say about what she said and how the chief of police responded.
Oh,
and I think what people need to understand is one thing, something extremely clear. So I'm going to do just a little 60-second history here. I truly understand the reformation of the police department. What people don't truly understand is the police department was born out of the Patty movement. What are Patties? Patties were slave catchers. They were basically people who were paid and who had a right to go out and retrieve property. That transformed in this country to the police department. So this has been lost in our history. Mm-hmm. So truly, that's what the foundation of the police department has been built on. So people always go, well, why is it so violent? Why is this acceptable? Why is this legal?
Because that was the intent of it.
Right, that was the intent of it to begin with. I mean, we have come a long way since the days of slave catchers. But if you go back and actually, I will tell everybody right now, if you're watching us, go back and look up slave catchers. Go back and look up the history of slave catchers, because in certain states, they were like, okay, I won't carry a stick, I'll carry a wet rope. Mm-hmm. You carry a whip. And you had a piece of paper that you kept in your top breast pocket, oddly enough, where your badge is worn. And people don't understand where this comes from. This is all part of our history. And that's why I tell people you have to watch the news, because you know what? History is unfolding before you. You have to know where we came from to understand where we are. So I think a lot of those antiquated ways, we're not a community, the police, I'm by no means calling the police slave catchers. But what I'm saying is that the foundation of the original police departments have been built on that. So many things are inherently normal till you get this look like, well, what are you talking about? And I understand that. I'm not making any excuses for that, but I think we have to understand where the police department originated from and where it came from, because there was a time in this country when we did not have a police department.
Right, and as well as their purpose. So, Prosecutor Savitt, what do you have to add to this?
Well, again, I think that what we saw this past week was welcome accountability. And one thing that I think was really really extraordinary if you look at the history of policing in the so-called thin blue line, was that you had police officers, including the chief of police, come in the George Floyd murder trial and actually testify against one of their own, and testify that Derek Chauvin's actions did not comport with any appropriate standard of policing, and indeed, in so many words, it was murder. That to me is an extraordinarily positive step. If we're looking for tea leaves and looking for what we hope, which is that this is a historic moment which really does catalyze further reform. I think we need police officers speaking out when things like this happen, when fellow officers abuse their power and commit murder. The silence that we've seen historically was broken in the George Floyd trial, and that to me is a very good thing. Here locally, one thing that I will say is that we have been working with our law enforcement partners around some reforms that I think can cut down on the number of interactions that police have with communities of color, which is tremendously important. One example, and we're talking about George Floyd this week, but of course we can't lose sight of the fact that another Black man was killed in Minnesota just about a week prior to the verdict, Dante Wright. And let's talk about why Dante Wright was stopped in the first place. He was pulled over because he had an air freshener dangling off the back mirror of his car. Now, this is the type of sort of pretext stop that police often engage in, and I'll tell you, across the country, they're not really caring about air fresheners. Police can pull you over for any traffic infraction and use that to gain consent without any other suspicion of a crime. If they ask you to search your car, right, they have then permission to search it, and the reason they're stopping you is because they want to go on a fishing expedition for drugs or other contraband. One thing, and look, let's be real. This is how racial profiling happens. This is the legal basis for racial profiling. We call them pretext stops in the law, but they are disproportionately wielded against Black people and people of color. One thing that we've been working on here in Washtenaw County, and I'm very glad to say that we've actually got a lot of support from law enforcement on this, is in the prosecutor's office, we've said, look, we're not interested in those types of charges, in contraband charges that arise from these so-called pretext stops, where they pull you over for a minor traffic infraction, use that without any other suspicion of a crime to gain consent to search your car, and then find something that comes of it. There's a few reasons for that. One is, the severe dignitary harm that comes from being pulled over in your car, knowing that what the police officer is after is not addressing the traffic violation, but they're really looking for something more, knowing that that's likely because of the color of your skin. It really is corrosive to police community relationships, but also, it makes these stops more tense. And the more of these stops you have, the more will end in tragedy like Dante Wright. So that's something we've been working on here. And as we talk about police moving in a different direction, I'm proud to say that law enforcement in Washtenaw County largely has been on board with this. Indeed, a couple of law enforcement chiefs here have said, not only are we okay with your policy, let us know personally if you decline a charge, if you refuse to charge a case based on one of these pretext stops, because we want to course correct with our officers and make sure that doesn't happen again. So I think we should be thinking about reforms like that, looking at the way in which these police-civilian interactions happen, cutting down on racial profiling. It's unacceptable. Of course, people have died as a result of this, and Dante Wright's not the only one. Look at Philando Castile, for example. But also looking at the many people that have suffered the embarrassment, the humiliation of being stopped, and sensing, of course, accurately that it is because of the color of their skin, and police officers have been profiling them. That's corrosive to community trust, and ultimately it makes our communities much less safe when you have these types of stops, and when you tear down that trust between law enforcement and the communities they serve.
Right. We call it DWB, driving while
Exactly.
And that's just it. And because I know one time I was stopped and my husband was in the car, and I'm like, why did you stop me? And my husband's like, calm down. I'm like, no, why did you stop me? I'm that person. And he said, well, he told me I was in a change lane too long. I looked at him. I said, do you really think I'm going to buy that? And he
Right.
goes, excuse me. I'm like, no, there is no excuse for what you just did. I said, do you really think that I'm going to buy that you followed me for 2 miles because I was in a change lane too long? And it does. I mean, immediately when I was stopped, and I have a brother who's a retired Compton, California police sergeant, training sergeant, and I have a half brother who's actually a DPD officer. So I understand police officers. There are people, there are good ones and there are bad ones. And I just thought to myself, do you really think I'm going to buy that excuse that I was in a lane that is for changing lanes only too long? I said, how long too long? 2 seconds, 5 seconds, a minute, a mile? And he was like, I said, you know what? Call your duty sergeant. I'm like, before you talk to me, call your duty sergeant. He goes to the car. He comes back. He goes, ma'am, I think I'm going to let you go.
Well, I think when we're looking at reform and trying to change this, I think we really need to look at that hiring process. So we're not hiring individuals that are enacting these engraved acts on people of color. So I think that's where we need to start looking at how are we hiring? What are we doing any form of psychological testing to see if these individuals are even fit to serve as police officers?
Or do we have officers that were fired in one department because of so many complaints against them, and they jumped to another department,
or another state,
right? Or another state, because once you're fired, because your captain just said, you know what, we're not violent, you cannot behave like this, and now we let you go, and you leave that police department and you go to another one, and that pattern's repeated again. And sometimes the police department that's hiring you don't even know that. So I think there's like this code of silence that goes in between departments, which, like you said, I hope this George Floyd trial has actually shown that as a police chief, you can have some courage. You can actually stand up and say, this is wrong. So maybe do you sort of see police chiefs sort of moving in that direction, maybe doing a little bit more investigation of their new hirees and demanding more answers?
Right. Even before they get hired, there should be some type of process in place to see their altitude.
Right.
Yeah.
What do you think? Do you think maybe that's something that might start becoming the norm in police departments instead of something that's rare?
I certainly hope so. And you brought up you both brought up several really important points, including the fact that, so 100%, we need to make sure that police officers are, fit to serve the communities that they are serving. But then also we need to make sure that we're not sort of recycling and passing off the bad officers among different departments. That happens far too frequently. One thing that I know that has been discussed is a public statewide database of officers that have engaged in misconduct, so that neighboring police jurisdictions do know that you shouldn't hire this person, and so that the community at large knows that as well. And I think that's entirely appropriate. Look, I'm a lawyer, right? And if I engage in misconduct, or if any lawyer engages in misconduct, they're going to be sanctioned by the state bar. And they may well lose their law license, which means that they can't just go to a neighboring community and engage in the same sort of unethical behavior, maybe stealing from clients, misrepresenting things to the court, etc. That's the right thing. I'm glad that the legal profession has that. Law enforcement officers are, the officers in our society that are, allowed to use force that represent the state's ability to use force to achieve its aims. It is a incredible responsibility. And if you have breached that trust in one jurisdiction, you shouldn't be able to just go down the road to another jurisdiction and continue that same course of misconduct. So I think transparency is really important. I think we need that database, frankly, not just statewide, but nationwide too. I don't want a bad officer from Washtenaw County going down the road to Toledo, Ohio either.
And we definitely don't want them in Detroit.
You're absolutely right. You know what, Prosecutor Sabat, Yusuf Rabi, I would like to thank you both so very much. Thank you for standing up. Thank you for actually doing what we do, speaking truth to power, because as a prosecutor, I mean, you have to go to basically the chief of the police department and say, look, this is what I'm expecting from your people. If not, I'm going to call you on it. And you know what, Rep. Robbie, you have to reach out across the aisle to the Republicans and say, you know what, this is going to be good for all of us because we all have to do better. And you know what, we are so grateful for both of you. We have enjoyed our time with you on Speaking Truth to Power, and we look forward to having you both back again because from what I'm seeing on my phone, I think people want to hear from both of you a lot. Thank you very much and have a great Sunday.
And everyone tune in each and every Sunday from 4 to 5 p.m. with Speaking Truth to Power with myself, Dr. Thomas,
Denise Kiechoff,
and
Leah Dodson.
Have a great evening.
Thank you, everybody.
And come on out to the backyard boogie. We're going to have some fun today.
All right. Goodbye, everybody.